Welcome to Becoming Parents podcast. I'm Jen Taylor, your host. I am mom of 18, and you can find me on momsrunningit.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive right in.
Welcome to Becoming Parents. I'm Jen Taylor, your host, and today I'm here with James from Fit for Birth. How are you doing today?
Yay! I love today. I love that I'm here with you.
I do too. That's so great. Isn't that crazy? But I kind of feel like that always.
Yeah, it's good when
Yeah,
life works out that way. Let's make it happen more often than not.
I totally agree. I'm on board for that. And I'm going to ask you questions a little out of order because I know you had a transition in your business. I love not knowing much, but enough to know where to start. Tell me about your profession before you were a parent, because that changed. It was having a baby was pivotal.
Well, I have a I often say that I bought my first scientific journal on strength training and exercise and health in eighth grade. So I have a long history of like being dedicated to fitness, even though I went to college. I got a kinesiology degree, but the whole time I was like, well, this isn't a real job, right? I can't be a personal trainer or anything like that. So it was just I happened to be called up to work at a gym in DC, and I didn't have anything to do. I was going to go back and live in my parents' basement until I got a real job. And they offered me a job as a personal trainer, and I was like, okay, I'll do this until I get a real job. And then it just kept going from there. So needless to say, it was my passion though, and the fact that I could get paid helping people in health was amazing, right? And then specifically in exercise and fitness and stuff like this. So I ate all this stuff up. I was a natural in kinesiology. I then found my way to various holistic coaching courses and things like this, and ultimately became, well, fast forward today, I'll go back in a second, but I teach things like breathing, movement, which, well, I can go into all these in details if we want, but nutrition, lifestyle, and then thoughts. Those are like the five things. If we do those things right, then let's do those first before we reach for, medications, if at all possible, things like
Mm,
that, right? So that I went from being very invested in fitness to being very invested in holistic health. And everywhere I went, I was the healthiest person. I put my finger in the antioxidant test, and they're like, oh, we don't even have a number to register how high your antioxidant. This sort of like fun things would happen to me, right? So I'll jump into my business. Is that so? There I am, personal training and health coaching and doing that sort of thing. And I marry. We decide we're going to have a kid. The pregnancy happens fast, faster than we even thought. I have little mini stories inside all of this, I suppose too. And for me, what it was is, oh, this I've been spending my whole life dedicated to health. That's my top value. That's the thing. How do I have a healthy baby? And that combined with sort of my natural instinct to be a dad. I had always thought that I would be a dad, and always well hoped and thought that I would be a really good dad. And thankfully, a lot of that feels like I've fulfilled on that. But as part of that, I had this idea in my head that I didn't want to be a dad that was not able to be with my child. And so at the
mm,
time, I was like, well, let me convert my garage to a home gym. And I'm learning a lot about pregnancy. And I'm the truth is, how I got into Fit for Birth is because I went to call up the experts, and I couldn't find someone who
uh,
knew who did this, who did like, well, fitness and holistic health from a perspective that I was looking for. I also knew this, by the way. I'm a person who doesn't use a lot of medications. Going to the hospital is, in my mind, that's like for sick care, and that's a whole other story, right?
mhm,
But to have a baby there didn't make sense to me. And so a lot of things were happening. I was at this time I was looking for, well, where might we have a baby? I have family in Portugal. I was looking in Europe and things like this. um, my wife at the time, it was kind of cool because I was the driver in holistic health. So I was like, at the time, I'd never heard of a midwife before at
mm,
that point in my life. And I was like, I don't remember how old it was, 28 or 30 or something like that. And so I started to do research, and going from, well, where in the world can we have a baby outside of a hospital, to lived in Miami at the time, and happened upon the Miami Maternity Center, which was just a few miles from the house, which was a midwifery clinic where midwives were. And so I remember distinctly telling my wife, saying, well, just come with me. She was a little bit resistant. It was
Mm,
interesting. I was like, well, just come for the look. I'm not going to force you to have a baby in a way you don't want, but because it was very new, it was very, again, we hadn't heard of this. And so I said, well, let's just go to the what is it, the interview, the show around, the tour, right? And so I remember sitting there in this, makeshift house, and they put on a video for us, and then they showed us around. Well, it was such an impactful event that not only was I sold, but she, who was also a fitness professional, she decided to go to midwifery school there for the remainder of her pregnancy. And so we now had this, emerging family health business where we set up getfitforbirth.com. And at first I thought it would just be, well, I'll make some business cards and I'll convert that home gym, like I said. And I figured that if pregnant people and postpartum people were the ones I was primarily training, then my little toddler could come crawling in and there wouldn't really be a professionalism issue with that or
right.
something. And then I'm a stay-at-home dad type of thing. And oh man, this was going to be, this was the life that I wanted to create. I'll pause there for a second. Have I answered your question? I think so.
Yes. And oh my gosh, how crazy. It's interesting because most of us remember, like we remember being pregnant with the first child, whether you're a dad or a mom, right?
Mhm.
And instantly all of the questions that you don't even know to ask. Like you
Yeah.
don't, I knew how I wanted it. I knew I wanted a natural birth. I knew I wanted to breastfeed. Like I knew all these things. I had these opinions, but you don't know what to ask or who to ask or how to ask. And I think society's ingrained this level of fear surrounding birth. And I remember thinking it's going to be a really tough 24 hours because the average first labor is 24 hours, right? I've
Yes.
had really bad days. I've had really bad 24 hours that didn't result in someone handing me my own child that I had just grown. I just grew a human that I birthed.
That's right.
So, like, if I could just get through a tough 24 hours, but you don't even know what questions to ask. So, I think most of
Yeah.
us have been there. And okay, so then we have propagation of fear
Yeah.
and the fact that the medical community is like well, I just almost said something. I'm glad I didn't say it, but the medical community is similar to other large organizations in the sense that they're like, it's okay. Don't be afraid. We'll take care of you. And because you're a little nervous and you haven't experienced it and you don't know what to expect, and there's propagation of fear, there's a
Yeah.
big part of, I think, women who are pregnant who want to hear that. Like, that's comforting, not
Want to
understanding.
hear that
Well,
someone
I'll
else is
take
in
care of you.
charge. Yeah.
Right. I'll take care of you. Because one thing that I really felt pretty strongly about is that once I went into labor, I was not going to be the one responsible for making my own decisions anymore. Like, I wanted to focus on having
Mhm.
that baby.
Mhm.
And that means that you're relinquishing control to someone or
Yeah.
something. So I find it's interesting how we all kind of come to that and how you came to it holistically. That's awesome. So she signs up for midwifery and you've changed your business model and you're renovating the garage. What ended up
Yeah.
happening with her midwifery and what happened with the home gym?
Well, okay. So ultimately, she and I separated, but that's like a whole fun story. Let's see. Let's see what I can tell you. I'll tell you we had some really wonderful. I'll tell you a story about our success somewhere in there with a pregnant person, and then I'll tell you kind of what happened to us because I know that you said you'd like to get into my kind of unique story of where
Yeah.
my kids have come from, right? So somewhere in this fit for birth health journey, a we're training clients and that's working out and I'm learning a lot, and quite frankly I'm kind of I'll just say I used to be kind of like a raving lunatic against the system, really really like if it's not organic I'm not putting it in my mouth, just really really stringent. And then also that reflects my views of the or my view, I guess I'll say, because I now have a view that's sort of like all things have their place, and there is learning to be had, and I have a role to play to help people move in the direction that they want. but it's not my role to bring people down, even if it's the great organization of the AMA who has a lot of power and money and stuff like
Right.
this, right? So this is just my background of where I come from. So, I've often said, oh, I want to bring down the AMA by by showing all the statistics about how birth is better with a midwife, right? So I learned all of this stuff along the way, and it was quite amazing. Like we have stories all the way around from people. Like a very common client of ours is like someone who felt, to your point, mistreated in the hospital during birth number 1 and was like, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to give my shot at a VBAC or something like that with a midwife and at home and all this sort of stuff, if at all possible. And of course, the rules, the laws that exist in this country make that very difficult in some places, right? So to my story, there was one woman, as an example, who called, just to give a sense of how I learned to coach. And she was questioning everything about her pregnancy. It was not a planned pregnancy. She didn't know if she wanted to keep the pregnancy. She didn't have the most stable relationship with the father, things like this. She called us and she resonated with whatever our message was online. At the time in 2008, there weren't a lot of, I would say, companies that I was able to find talking about holistic health and pregnancy. So she found us. She wanted to do an immersion of sorts. At the time, my wife was living she was in California for a small period of time, and I was in Miami. So at the time that this woman wanted to travel, she decided, we created a plan for her that she would go for 3 days to California to spend time with my wife at the time there. And then she would spend the next 7 days with me in Florida. And this was her health journey. We were going to do breathing, nutrition, movement, lifestyle, and thoughts, right? And so the first thing I handed her was a book called Power of Now, and a journal, and said, well, read some of this. The Power of Now is basically about that mind chatter that we all have, and just let's be aware of that, right? So that was like kind of the foundation of thoughts, if you will. I did an assessment with her, like a fitness assessment. In my house, now this was really cool because I learned some things about her. She never slept soundly through the night. She was on fibroid medication for fibroids on the uterus. She had a number of like challenges, health. Her main source of food was kind of like fast food. Going to like CVS is where she got a lot of her groceries, if you will, like a convenience store. So she came into my house, and again, after spending a few days already starting to change her nutrition a little bit. And then she came to me for like the formal, we're going to exercise now. It's going to be a little more regimented. The first 3 days was a little more relaxed. And I remember telling her, she's like, well, what are we gonna have for breakfast? I'm like, well, you have all the unprocessed vegetables and then animal food that you want. Animal foods, like, it could be fish or chicken or meat or whatever. But very like kind of how I think of our ancestors probably ate, right, with the least amount of processed foods. And that sets the stage. Then she goes to sleep for the first night, and she wakes up the next day. And I remember sitting at my little table office, and she comes out and she's like, with this very question, she's like, this is amazing. This is the best I've slept in years. Like, she slept through the night for the first time in a long time. And I'm like, oh, I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, that's kind of working fast, right? But granted, she had a couple of days already of relaxation, and she's here with me. So fast forward again, we the second night comes, she sleeps, wakes up the next day, she comes to me and she's like, well, James, I've been on this fibroid medication for pain. My doctor told me to just take it only when I have pain, but I take it every day because I'm in pain every day. And I have all the thoughts about, okay, well, let's see. I don't like the medications and stuff, and especially when you're nurturing a baby. Long story short, though, is she's like, but today, and since yesterday, she was explaining to me, I just feel like I don't need to take it anymore. It would turn out that she would not take them again in her pregnancy, actually. That's like 2 immersed days, or if you want to count 5, right? Let's say of this immersion. And then finally, the 3rd day with me, which would be on the 6th day, she woke up, and something I didn't know, she was like, I didn't tell you that I've suffered from really terrible back acne my entire life. I take a medication for it every day of my life, but my doctor told me I couldn't do it any longer once we knew I was pregnant. So I haven't been taking it, and there I have, the acne is there. But I looked in the mirror this morning and it looks nearly gone, she said. And she said, she said, "Is this normal?"
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, it definitely can be normal. Still almost like surprised myself with how fast it took for that to happen. And so to me, that's a wonderful story of, and like when you start to just change things in these 5 foundations: breathing, movement, nutrition, lifestyle, and thoughts. Wow, things can really change. Now, we got a message from her sister a couple months later saying essentially, some months some months ago, my sister came to you, and her words were, "I didn't know if she was going to make it." And she said, "Whatever you guys did, thank you so much," because it really changed the whole dynamic of her pregnancy and the welcoming of this little one into their life and such like that. And, just again, one of those stories that I love. It explains kind of how we worked at Fit for Birth, how it began. Today, Fit for Birth is an education company, and we provide personal training services to pre and postnatal people. And so it's evolved, from there, which is really cool. I love that I coach trainers actually around the world is actually the
Mm.
main thing that I do. I'll pause there for a moment. I'm going to go back now and give you the juicy details of the unexpectedness of my personal life, if you're ready for them.
I'm ready.
All right. So the fun part about me and my former wife is that, boy, she was persistent. I knew from the beginning that she was not really the girl for me, but wow, did she just keep coming for me, is what is obviously this is my version of the story, although she would agree with the majority of it. And so finally, what was interesting is that she said, "Let's do a business." And at that point, it was like, just, "Oh, we'll do something online or whatever." And that's what kind of got me. And then life went and romance began and
Right.
things like this, right? Now here's the kicker. Since you like to go to the nitty gritty, and I've never said this on a recorded place before, but what the heck was I going to say? It's a good one. I'm going to keep you on a cliffhanger for a moment.
Okay, cliffhang me. That's fine. So she
Is
pursued you and you wanted to start a business. So you were very like-minded and then it became romantic.
Yeah, yeah. And so she fell in love with someone else. That was the kicker that just left my brain for a moment. She fell in love with someone because we were maintaining this distance of, we're not going to be together. That's what the story I was saying. And so she was falling in love with someone else. And guess what I did, being afraid to lose her in my life? I said, "Well, I'll marry you." so so that was our marriage. And then from her point of view, she's like, well, she knew that she had this new relationship that was emerging, but she also knew that the last few years has been invested in our relationship with me. And so in my words, she chose the logic as opposed to the
Right.
emotion, went with me. And well, life is perfect. But
Yeah.
like from a physical perspective, probably we shouldn't have done that, but it's perfect. So that's how actually we got married. Now we were married. We then decided, let's have a child. We did. It's the conception of the child that, by the way, she also had PCOS and was told by the doctor she probably wouldn't be able to have a baby for a long time. We got pregnant the very first time we tried. So that's, again, because I believe it's also like she had changed her nutrition and her, like all those things had changed, right? So wonderful. Okay, great. So then we realize, okay, we're not, it's, everyone thinks we're a great couple. We're certainly respectful of each other. All these things work. We're the type of couple that, I read on your in some of your stuff that you used to make things from scratch. Well, that's kind of what we were doing. Everything's organic. We grow our own food in the back too, in the middle of Miami. We're homeschooling the kids is the whole idea. Like we're moving into that sort of thing. And that's like, all the world is on us, but we don't have our parents. We don't have we don't have our village, really. It's just, we're doing all the stuff, and we're running a business, and I'm working at a local gym and all these things, right? So it's a lot of stuff. But I'm sort of bouncing around in the order here. The point with she and I is that we decided, okay, it's time to separate. We went to live 1 block apart from each other on South Beach during this time. And this was a really tough time for me. I mean, it's tough to see my little, at the time now, nearly 2-year-old, who can walk down the street with me, and he doesn't understand why he slept the night at daddy's, And now I'm walking him to the corner because I'm off to work, and I'm dropping him where she's picking him up at the corner. And his first words, not first words, but he can barely he can't put sentences together even. But I hear him saying things like, "Mommy, Daddy," to, this way, like something like that. And I mean, maybe that's the most heartbreaking moment if I really take a moment to sit with it, like of this whole time. So it was tough, but we go on. I'll speed through the next one to say that we each go on to have a baby shortly after that. Now she realizes, so I'll tell you like this, she gets pregnant, and she realizes that guy is not a guy she wants to keep hanging out with. She realizes I need to kind of change, or she wants a change. She wants to go to Hawaii to give birth to her who would be a daughter. And I'm very, supportive. We have a good relationship, this sort of thing. I say, well, I'll come for a month and I'll stay 2 weeks before your due date, and 2 weeks after. I'll take care of our little one who will be with her during that time. And I'll just, it'll be really fun. I get a vacation in Hawaii and we do this whole fun thing together. And it's unconventional. And that fuels me. I like unconventional, like I want to support this birth. Well, it turns out that she had our first son was born in the water at the Miami Maternity Center. This daughter was born in the tub of in Hawaii with a midwife also, and I was there for that. Well, I found out just a couple of days before coming back from that 1 month in Hawaii that I was going to be a father with someone who was, like two people were like, hey, we're both getting divorced, why not? So not
wow.
someone who was like, oh, I see you as my partner, let's do this, which, I guess I've learned a lot in my life, but that was one of them. So there that was. Now I, again, go into this absolute panic. I'm like, I'm the guy, it was kind of like, the nice guy and the homecoming person of high school who's going to have a nice family. This is my vision of myself, and what, some of which did happen. I'm going to have a nice family and 2.5 kids and a dog and this sort of thing. And all of a sudden, I'm not only in a divorce with some of those heart-wrenching moments with my child, but now I'm having a baby with someone who I didn't even, and I don't want as my partner, like I don't see raising, we're going to totally do this independently, or separate. And this was not the vision I had in my life. And at the time, it's funny because looking back, I'm like, well, that's my story. But at the time, I was an absolute complete mess. Now, I won't say her name out loud, but my ex-wife now, who I'm in Hawaii with, she's high on the emotions of oxytocin. She likes unconventional too. And she, we still have all of our history together. And somewhere along the way in those last days and the months following, we decide we're going to get back together and have this unconventional family. So we move back to Miami together. And there we have some of our own experiences of co-breastfeeding the infants and stuff like that. Turns out she was friends with with the other mom of my child. And so there's how I ended up with 3 kids for the next few years. I'll try to keep it
Almost
anonymous.
saying, or yeah.
Yeah. So, just in case, I mean, I love her very much. We have a very good relationship. It hasn't always been that way. We've gone through our ups and downs, but I can definitely say that I love her dearly for all of the evolution that has been with her, and more that's to come. I feel really great, and time has gone by, and we really do a pretty good job of co-parenting well at this point. I'm really blessed because the 2 moms in my life are both very spiritually minded people who want to be good people. Like they're conscious of themselves, and I attempt to be as well. And I think that's the best mix I got of all the challenges and the ways it could have gone. I'm blessed in a lot of ways, So for the next few years, to finish this story, I end up with 3 children, one that was purposely planned inside a marriage, one that was not purposeful outside of a marriage, and one that who does not know and would never meet her dad. This is more 10 years or so later. And so she grew up in my house calling me daddy for those first few years, until finally my ex-wife get back together person. And I decided, and that's, oh my gosh, that's an interesting, heart-wrenching story too, as to how we got to that point, to finally two nice people who are doing well and everyone loves us, the fitness couple, and like I said, the homeschooling and the growing our own food. I mean, all the things were wonderful, but just that bond or thing that keeps people together just wasn't there. But at that time, I would say that neither of us really wanted to be the one to say, let's move on again, so we needed a divine intervention. I'll pause there for a second. I don't know if there's time to go into that divine intervention. You tell me.
There's 3 kids pretty close together. And so you said it's been about 10 years. So in the past 10 years, you've parented well with both women, raised these kids. It's gone
Yeah.
pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, pretty well. Okay, so what does pretty well mean? I spent a good deal of time feeling, oh my gosh, I mean, really different stories with different kids too. There was this idea, and again, stuff I've not said out loud in a place like this, is that I know what it's like to have 3 different relationships with 3 different kids. Like I think as parents, we want to treat our kids equally and to feel the same amounts of things with them. But oh my gosh, I know what it's like to just feel different things with my kids. And so there's this idea, and maybe a lot of it is not, I need to be more heart-centered and not in my brain so much about stuff. I'm sure that's a lot of it. But like the child that I had originally on purpose, like was like the one that, okay, she and I made a legal agreement. It was checked by a judge, but it was like, without lawyers, whatever, we made it ourselves. But then she moved back to Hawaii, and there I am having to deal with, am I going to fight this and oh my gosh, that was just so hard. It was so hard for me, because I guess I was letting go of this identity. I was a guy for a period of time during these separations and such that was running. I had hundreds of people in my cell phone that I would text for play dates. And like I was running, playground play dates. Like, in other words, it was a huge part of my identity. And here I was, like letting this go. And just as one example. So, in terms of like, it went pretty well. Well, my son born 2008, and then the daughter's coming in the 2011 timeframes. They, like, I think that here we are in 2022, and thankfully the time has unfolded and allowed a lot of things to pass. With both relationships, the second, so I mentioned how the first one went. The second one never had a formal legal agreement, but I've been sort of doing my duty, if you will, in that way, with the child support and stuff like this. But it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been like, in my head, it's not like, oh, what it is in my head is, oh crap, I barely have enough. Like I've had a lot of survival things that I have to go through, and it took a lot. This was, I can sort of look, if I scan back for a moment and say, well, what did James pick in his life to have to get through, get over, and let go of? Well, this was a lot of it, like taking this section of my identity, this, what I think is fair, and being like, well, I'm stuck between wanting to be a good guy and stuck between what I think is actually fair. And that I've waved between, and I know what it's like. I know what it's like to not want to get out of bed because I feel so depressed. I've joked in the past, I said, for a period of my life, if I wasn't a holistic health coach, I'd have been on antidepressants for sure. There was some tough things. And, I'll say it this way. I don't know if this is wholly accurate in the feeling right now, but I've often been a little, and maybe we all have, we've been a little bit afraid of, what others think of you, right? We're all afraid of what others think of us to some extent. And that's very big for me, but I also was with very strong women who were leaders. And so, like I had a little more maybe feminine, they have a little more masculine. And so this has been part of my interesting journey of being like, hey, can you please talk to me differently? And in not always those words. And for me, this was a real learning lesson. And thankfully I've made a a good, and we all have, we've all grown through this. And I would say currently right now, I have a much closer communicative relationship with my ex-wife than I do with the mom of my kid, who, I just kind of, the call goes directly to my child when I FaceTime with her or whatever. And it works because I just haven't, if you don't try to change the dollar amounts and the economics of it, then things just kind of go by and the years go on and it's fine. And that's what I learned is, let me just leave it alone and stop messing with it. And then things can settle in more peacefully. Now, I realize I've been a little bit somewhat like maybe vague there, but I'm also really telling you from my heart, like, this has been my journey for sure. And it's definitely been uncomfortable, but where I am right now is feeling way, way better about it. And in hindsight can see the so-called perfectness of all the things, right? And I have a really strong belief that that's it. Like, I came here, I chose to have these experiences. I worked with God to create this whole thing, to mess it all up, and quite frankly, to always have, like I said, like, what a blessing to have two conscious women to do this with, right?
Yeah.
To hold space for me when I'm unable and incapable or unwilling to do it. Like, I've been really blessed. It's almost like the solutions in hindsight, right there, I can't always see them, but in hindsight, I was like, well, the solutions and the help and the angels, they were always there. They were always there even before the problem, or the thing in my head that I had to let go of and get through. All right, I'll pause there for a moment.
I want to go
Now
back to the fitness business because we understand your alternative parenting journey. And I think a lot of the struggles and successes within that. So you were planning on opening things up in a garage. And this is also a place that we can end on because I love to end with shameless self-promotion. So I
Great.
want you to talk about what happened from the garage to now and where people can find you and how they can become coaches and all of that stuff. So
Cool.
jump in with that.
Awesome. Yeah. So we set up getfitforbirth.com, and I started researching heavily and sort of converting holistic health and doing what I thought made sense with pregnancy, because again, there wasn't a lot of like research and stuff like that available and stuff like that. And so some of it is sort of like creation from my intuition and working with people directly. And then of course, a lot of it was I was compiling the information and bringing it in wherever I could. And then I was writing articles. And one article I wrote got picked up by a newspaper in New York that had an international presence. And then she asked me to write for their health section every week. So for the next year, the year that I was researching pregnancy the most, we ended up having getfitforbirth.com at the bottom of every article, and editors from France, I mean, you name the countries would contact me and say, hey, we'd like to translate this article to our language. Can we have your permission? And so the story goes that 6 months later or so, the articles I was writing had been converted to a dozen languages, and 150 countries were coming to us. And I'll never forget the day that a doctor from India contacted me to ask my advice for something, and I was like, holy, this is definitely taking off now, and then the critical changing part is I was, my ex-wife, she was the more the natural birth person. She would bring that aspect in, and we incorporated that into our programs, into our writings and stuff like that. Mine was the educating the professionals. I was already educating fitness professionals in these gyms. And so that voice must have been heard, because then people started asking if we could provide a course for them to learn as a fitness professional. And so actually in one of our stints in Hawaii, we ended up giving our first pre and postnatal corrective exercise specialist course for a few days. We then ended up going on to get it pre-approved for CECs in the fitness world. And then, today we're approved by dozens, and we have thousands of practitioners in, more than 50 countries. And so, yes, we sort of are a company for two audiences. On one hand, if you're a fitness professional or wellness professional who wants to, or quite frankly, a doula, that's our secondary market, our doulas. because they want to add health coaching and exercise. It's pretty cool when you can put someone through a 10-minute assessment and then solve their back pain, knee pain, or whatever in literally the first exercise you give them. That's a great skill to have. And so, that's just an example of what we teach with corrective exercise. Like, let's use the right muscles, not just mindlessly burn calories with the wrong muscles, which would be more of the traditional fitness way to do it. And so yes, we're a company for that audience, the professionals, whether it's fitness professionals or birth workers in general, or wellness professionals. And then we of course have programs like, we have a prenatal wellness course for that is basically structured on those 5 foundations: breathing, nutrition, lifestyle, movement, thoughts. And if it's kind of like this, how there's childbirth preparation courses, which are very centered on learning what you need to know for childbirth. Well, ours would be like a complementary course to that, where it's like, well, you're doing that course. Ours is a 12-hour course that you can do at the leisure, online or whatever. And it's an opportunity for you to become healthier, to implement health things for you and your family and for your baby specifically. We start with a little bit of history of childbirth, like telling you about what to expect. So we know that a lot of people coming in will be like me all the way, and like my wife at the time. We're going to walk into it being like, okay, well, let's go to the doctors, because that's what birth is in this country. Like, let's go to the hospital. So we start with a little bit of that, and we say, here are your birth rights. Here are the things that the culture differences between midwifery and medicine. And then we go straight down the list of, here's breathing, here's how you can start implementing a change for yourself. We allow you to do in this course you do a self-assessment for yourself, and then you can start to learn how to use the right muscles for yourself with a little, sort of jumpstart you in that direction, so you understand corrective exercise. A good deal on nutrition and various things based on our ancestors. That's really the question that I often use to answer, what should we be doing today? It's probably wise to start with what our ancestors did, because we still have those genetics, and our genetics are used to, for example, exercise. It's not like, I don't think of exercise as something you can do to be healthier. I think of exercise as a mandatory requirement for health as a human being. That's a very different shift. And so if you don't feel like exercising every day, well, how can we move like the healthiest, longest living centenarians? How can we just move in a day that isn't gonna, burn you out or wipe you out again, but is gonna be like part of a nice balanced spectrum of just daily movement, walk to the store and bike ride and garden and stuff like this. And then the thoughts and lifestyle, we get into EMF and household toxins and circadian rhythms, as well as then the beginnings of the most important foundation of all is really your mind. And that goes from the physical hormones of stress and cortisol and stuff like that, to an introduction of how you can quiet your mind and the importance of that, especially with today. We have so much information coming in that compared to walking out of a mud hut thousands of years ago, where there was just the same trees and the same people mostly every day. The amount of information we get from our phones and from the bus stop advertisement and from everything, signs everywhere, is technically, we should say that the human brain has not yet evolved to be able to handle that amount of information. And so many people go to sleep at night and there's the information coming, trying to process. And so we can't sleep, for example, right? We need to learn ways to calm that inner, that voice that creates stress, that is looking for problems to solve much of the time. So I'll pause there. Those are our, oh, and I guess the last program we have is, if you actually want a personal coaching, personal trainer, we do video calls for people all around. So super easy. Trying to help you get toward health.
Thank you, James, so much for being so open about your life and your parenting journey and your career journey that kind of skipped and held hands. I really appreciate you.
Wow, thank you. Well, I definitely appreciated being here. I could go on for hours and hours with you. So thank you so much. It was fun to laugh with you before recording too.
Yes.